also super excited about this talk. It's a subject that's close to my heart.
Okay, good luck then.
Great. Okay. Well, I shall get on with it. Yes. So today, guys, I'm going to be talking about cannibalization of content, and it is a subject that's close to my heart. I talk about it a lot. I encounter it on a daily basis, and one of the reasons for that is that cannibalization, in all of its forms, and there are 4 main forms, is on the increase as Google becomes increasingly sensitive to and intolerant of content and pages that are similarly themed, and it's actually really damaging to the performance of our content. So it's also starting to answer questions that we're often being asked, questions like, why has my visibility dropped when I haven't done anything? Why is my organic visibility so volatile? And finally and lastly, why can't I get onto page 1 despite everything that I am doing? And some of the reasons for this are based upon this cannibalization. And the four types of cannibalization I want to go through today are, firstly, internal cannibalization, which we often refer to as internal conflict. Secondly, subdomain conflict, international conflict, and finally, and most mysteriously, semantic flux. And semantic flux rose its head soon after Google introduced Hummingbird, and that's the reason why it's called semantic flux. But more on that later. So to begin with, I want to go through internal cannibalization, and I'm going to introduce internal cannibalization with a number of different examples. And there's a lot of data here, but the data is really easy to understand. So in our first example, I'm going to ask a question, and this question is something that we often get asked. We've lost our positions. What have you done? And this is a question that often gets asked of the people looking after the website. And sometimes they'll turn around and say, we've done absolutely nothing. And here's somebody who's actually done absolutely nothing. And this somebody is EasyJet. Now let me explain how this chart works. We've got the left-hand axis, the y-axis, that's positions 1 down to 100 in Google. And in this case, it's Google UK regular desktop search. The search term here is a flight to Liverpool, and we've got a date period starting from the 4th of November up until April 2015. So back in April 2014, EasyJet were position 1, page 1 for this term. They then started to drop, and then they rose back up, and then they dropped, and then they rose back up. This is actually an example of suspicious flux, something I call suspicious flux, because so often this is a precursor to a much bigger problem that's just about to arise around the corner. And there you can see in February 2015, they went from position 1 in Google down to position 10. They didn't do anything. But you know what caused that? This is what caused it. Okay, Google has suddenly decided to position and cluster all of the URLs. And I think here we've got about 16 different URLs. Those always existed, but it's just around this point in time, 2015, a lot of this started. These pages all started to conflict with each other. And we've moved from an existence at the top of page 1 to a coexistence and clustering at the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2. So effectively, EasyJet have lost their visibility and then have lost their traffic for this term. And I've got an example of just 2 of those pages for flights to Liverpool. And here they are, very similarly themed pages. The reason why this has happened is because EasyJet has not made it exactly clear to Google which is the canonical page, which is the trophy page, which page they want to be found for flights to Liverpool. And if you don't make it clear to Google, Google gets confused and internal conflict is right around the corner, and that kills the visibility. So that's the first very straightforward example. Okay, for our second out of these 6 examples, here's the question. I can't understand what's going on. And this is a question that you often hear coming from SEO agencies who've been posed questions by their clients. Why have we dropped? Why are we volatile? I'm looking at the data, but I can't understand what's going on. And the reason for that is that sometimes you just have to dig a little bit deeper. And this next example is an absolute classic. It's a brilliant example of why it's so important to look deep in the SERPs. Okay, and here it is. Okay, the site in question is Currys. Okay, the search term in this case is Apple laptop. Now this was September, okay, 2015. We're moving towards the final quarter. We're coming up to Christmas. What's the one thing they should be doing? They should be pushing this page for Apple laptop from position 2 or 3 here up to 1. It's fairly straightforward, isn't it? Let's look at it. Let's look at the link architecture internally. Let's look at the theming of the page. Can we do anything? But you know what? They didn't do anything. And it dropped from position 2 around the 1st of October to outside of top 100. Came back up, struggled a bit, and then dropped back out. You want to know what caused that? Classic internal conflict. Okay, and there it is. So what's happened here? The page that was positioning, that was their Apple-MacBook laptops page, that was cannibalized initially by their computing-laptops page. Then that lost its position to another Apple MacBook page. This time it's a 12-inch gold MacBook. That then lost its positions to the student and the commercial page. So what's happened here is we've got multiple pages. Google's not sure which one to return, so it's forget it. I'm not going to return any of these until you sort your site architecture out, until you make it clear to me which page you want to return. I'm just going to kill them all. Okay, and that's just one example that happened to their site. There were many more. So we move on to the third example. Okay, and this again is something that I so often hear. You know, people email me or they'll ring up and they say, you know, I'm the only one in this space. I've tried everything, but I just can't get above the fold. What am I seeing here? I'm seeing a classic glass ceiling, and we're going to return to Argos here for this classic glass ceiling. Now, this is the phrase Apple laptop. Position 10 drops down and then drops onto the top of page 3, then comes back up a bit. But there are some very suspicious dips here. If you look just after the 23rd of September, there's a spike, a downward spike. We go into early October, there's a downward spike. We go into late October, and there's another spike. Now, as we move towards Christmas, towards the end of this chart, I can imagine talking to the web guy. How are we doing for Apple laptop? Okay, well, last week we were position 18. We're position 18. We've moved up to position 11. Okay, I think if we carry on this trajectory, by the time it gets to Christmas, we're going to be on page 1. Are they going to get onto page 1? Absolutely not. And here's the reason why. Because we were just looking at a straight line there. When you look behind that straight line, you can see 3 different conflicting pages. Argos simply haven't made it absolutely clear to Google which page they want to return for the phrase Apple laptop. And that creates that glass ceiling, which is why it's always important to look in detail at the full URL that's returning. And is that the same URL that was returning yesterday and the day before and the day before that? Because if those URLs are switching over time, then you're suffering from internal conflict, and the internal conflict will lead to that loss of visibility. So that's a great example. Okay, as we move on to example 4. Okay, this is a classic. The next chart certainly looks very odd to me. Kind of reminds me of Batman's ears. And there you have it. This is Santander, and this is the search term switch banks. Now, we go back to September 2015. They were position 11, 12, 10, 11, 10, glass ceiling. And then suddenly, as we move to October, okay, so we move to October, they suddenly drop down to position 85. They come up, and then they spike back up, and then they drop down. There's a lot of rises and falls and spikes, etc. So what do you think caused this. Okay, I think by now we know what caused this. Okay, it's classic internal conflict. So the search term is switch banks. Okay, the page that was returning was the current account guide to switching your current account. That's the page that we want to return. So which page has come in and cannibalized that? Well, it's the student graduate current account page. So we've got one page that we want to return, and we've got an imposter page that's come in and stolen that visibility. So I got to thinking, why? Why did that second page, that deeper page perhaps, that other page, why did that one come in and cannibalize the first one when the first one was the one that they wanted to return? Let's take a look a little bit further down in the detail. We look at the on-page optimization of those two pages. Okay, they're pretty similar. So for the term switch banks, neither are that well optimized from an on-page element perspective. Socially, however, that second page, the student one, has actually got, a higher number of Facebook likes. Okay, in terms of Google Plus, that's stronger. But the critical difference here is the backlink profile. The first page, the page they wanted to return, has got 23 backlinks from 8 domains. I'm looking to the right column there. The imposter page, that student page, has got 1,895 links from 43 domains. And then when we look a little bit more closely at those referring domains, they've actually got some really high-profile links from one of the country's biggest student blogs. And that has not only given them authority, but critically, it's given them traffic, and even that traffic without the authority has been shown to improve positions. So by doing nothing, but having those two pages exist, somebody else has come along and started linking, you get the authority, you've lost your visibility. Absolute classic. So as we move on to example 5, and this is some more suspicious flux. This is a company that was, if we go back to November 2014, sitting around the middle of page 1 is Barclays, and the search term is compare current accounts. So they were position 5, they went up to 4, they dropped to 5. Okay, throughout November, as we move into December, there was some flux here. But when you're looking at the domain as a whole, what do we see over time? A gradual decline. Suspicious flux, followed by a gradual decline. Whenever you see suspicious flux, volatility, switching URLs for a high-profile search term, you need to investigate. Barclays didn't investigate. This is what happened. Okay, so behind the scenes, let's take a look. Let's unpick those URLs. They've got 4 competing URLs. They've got one main current account URL. They've got a compare bank accounts. They've got a second compare bank accounts. Those two are identical, guys. Get a canonical tag on them, and then they've got a third one as well. Okay, and if you look at that fourth one, we've got current accounts. We've got a capitalization of the A in accounts. That page is identical to that first one, but that capitalization is picked up at a different URL. And there, they've moved from highest position 4 down to position 21 for compare current accounts. And I think if we look today, their positions have fallen even further. And this is exactly what happens, guys, when you fail to investigate, when you fail to dive into the SERPs and see what's going on. So, final example from our internal cannibalization. And I'll simply call this the final decline, because for these guys, it really was the final decline. And this is House of Fraser, search term loafers, in this case shoes rather than lazy people. Position 9 back in November, and they dropped and they dropped. They struggled. They've tried to get visibility. Well, actually, they haven't done anything. This has just been occurring. We know now why this is happening, and this is exactly why that was occurring, because we've got 4 different pages competing for the same term. And this is something that any website with a faceted navigation system or large product catalog needs to be very, very careful of, because when we look at these products themselves, okay, here we can see they are pretty much identical. When you look closely at them, you'll see they're slightly different. We've got ladies Loafers ladies shoes, 430 items, top left. Bottom left, we've got 431. Hence a different facet. We've got the main loafers shoes, and then we've got a, sorry, we can't find the item you're looking for. Okay, there are a number of things that they could do here. Let's get some canonical tags in here. Let's restrict the crawl space so Google doesn't get confused, and let's leave Google in no doubt as to which page should return for loafers shoes. Okay, it's very simple. It really is. So just to summarize this section before we go on to look at our next type of cannibalization, okay, it happens when Google's confused. This always, in my experience, results in position flux. And even if it doesn't result in flux, you'll find yourself sitting around the bottom of page 1 with one page returning one day, and then for the same search term, a different page returning. What does this actually look like? While you're presenting incoherent, uncoordinated, and haphazard doorways into your world, and that's never a good thing. So what do we need to do? Choose the page you want to return. Give it the authority. Ensure the wrong page is not given authority externally, like that example we saw with the student bank account. Theme it uniquely, theme it well, and get your structure right. And then there's one thing that I wanted to add into this deck, but I completely forgot. I actually have a flow chart, a guideline. It's a one-pager for editors to follow to prevent this from happening. So maybe we can find a way to get that to you guys afterwards. So that's internal cannibalization. The next variety is subdomain conflict. And this is where we first discovered cannibalization, and it was all to do with subdomains. And to be honest, there is no reason why anybody today should be using subdomains. And if you've got a subdomain and the content on there is anywhere similar to the main domain or vice versa, then you're heading for trouble. And I've got, I think, 3 examples. So here's example 1. We've dropped off page 1 of Google. Now let's take a look and see who that is. Okay, it's 3. So it's the telco provider. And in this case, they were, for the term smartphone, okay, it's a big term, they were sitting around the bottom of page 1. Okay, that's their first mistake. Right, they should have been closer to the top of page 1. But then suddenly, as we move into the middle of 2015, they dropped right out of the SERPs, and then they are floundering around below page 7. And you know what they've done? They haven't done anything. This is Google becoming increasingly insensitive to their structure, their subdomain structure. This is what caused it. Okay, so we've got the store subdomain, which is their main sales portal. That's the one they want to position. But hey, hang on a minute. They put an article about smartphone life hacks on their main domain. That article, okay, has actually garnered reasonable authority, but worst of all, it's killed the subdomain that they wanted to position, and eventually we lose them all from the top 100. Okay, they should have got a little bit. I mean, number one, they should have detected that, because it's quite easy, as long as you've got the right software, to detect the day that you've dropped has one of your other assets, has an affiliate, has a subdomain, has a competitor even stolen your content. What's caused this drop? So that's why you need to drill down. Example 2, slow erosion of visibility. This is a classic, and this one comes from the betting sector. This is bet365.com, who for the position or the search term online casino poker, position 5, okay, in June, and then they dropped below page 1. Then it came back up, and then it struggled, and we can clearly see that there's something that's pulling them down. What's pulling them down? This is bet365.com. Well, of course, it's a casino subdomain, and the gambling sector were the first ones really to utilize subdomains effectively. And I'm going back, 8 or 10 years, and in those days, Google did treat subdomains separately. I remember Matt Cutts saying that we treat subdomains effectively as separate sites. And then key people believed that, and then that carried on, but Google long ago stopped treating subdomains separately. Google knows the relationship here, and the content is anyway similar, you're going to lose your visibility. Okay, so example 3, Okay, I think this is our final example before we move on to international conflict. So here we have a suspicious drop. And I love this one, you know. I love this one for a number of reasons. So you're landing in London, you're looking for a hotel near Heathrow, you search for hotels Heathrow, and you found Hilton, who've got a wonderful hotel at Heathrow. The wine is very expensive, so I don't recommend that, but you know, otherwise it's a lovely hotel. And they were position 9 and 10 for several months. As we're coming up to Christmas 2015, before we move into 2016, suddenly they drop. Hilton, what have you done? You know what? We've done absolutely nothing. Remember, Google is becoming increasingly intolerant. Let's see what caused that. There you go. This is brilliant because Hilton, for some reason, have got a subdomain for the Hilton Garden Inn. HiltonGardenInn.3.hilton.com. That's the URL in yellow. And this is a classic for the following reason, because suddenly, without them doing anything, okay, other than have a subdomain, which they shouldn't anyway, no, as I said before, nobody should, the subdomains come up, it's pulled the main domain down to position 21 or 22, the subdomain drops out of the search, but the damage is done, and the main domain goes around, you know, floundering at the top of page 3 or even further. The reason why that's happening is because this subdomain, although it had made an appearance, it still exists. It's still indexed in Google. It may now have a position of 150, 180. It doesn't matter. You can be position 200 and you can still influence between one domain and another one, between one page and another, across one site to another. The SERPs are really powerful, so it's worth remembering that. So we're moving on to our third type of cannibalization. This one's international. Often hotel groups fall foul of this, but anyone that's still got separate domains or domains and subdomains, and to be honest, you can even get international conflict if you're using a single domain, if you don't set up your hreflang correctly. So it's one to watch out for. And here's our first example, and the first example is in a hotel sector. This is hotels.com for the search term Portugal hotels. Okay, so September through to November, you know, position 15 dropped down, a suspicious spike there shortly after the 5th of October. Very suspicious. You know, if I ever see a chart with a spike like that, you know, I want to see the data behind it. I want to find out what's going on. I'm never going to be satisfied with just looking at the spike. Those spikes that happen for a reason, and you need to investigate. Then we move on to the 29th of October, okay, towards the end. There's another spike, okay? That spike doesn't happen for no reason. So again, I'm suspicious. I want to investigate the SERPs. So as we scroll down, okay, here's the reason, okay? The reason is, okay, another domain, or the main domain. This is the .com, okay? So we've got a UK site in conflict with a US site, and we get a spike for one day. That's enough to pull the UK site out. And then as we move towards October, the .com has entirely killed the visibility of the UK site. And again, this is easy to fix. But first you've got to know what's going on, okay? And never trust those straight lines or lines with dips and spikes and suspicious flux without investigating. And our second example, and again, here's another hotel, and this time it's hotels combined. And I tell you what, guys, you know, the examples here, you know, I probably had 300 or 400 that I could have chosen to put into this. There's not a day that goes by when I don't see cannibalization in one form or another harming websites out there. And the bigger they are, the more likely they are to be harmed, to be honest. So this is hotels combined. It's a .co.uk, and the search term is Cyprus hotels. Now, you know, there's some very curious goings on there. Those dips are really suspicious. They need to be investigated. When we investigate, this is what we see. Okay. So we've got the .co.uk, we've got a UK site and the US site entirely in conflict. Who wins here? Nobody wins. The only person that does actually win are competitors who are saying, well, thanks for messing up your visibility due to your international conflict. Do you mind if I just take advantage of that and push myself further up onto page 1? Okay, so those were the three main types of cannibalization. I'm now going to move on to the much misunderstood and maligned semantic flux, which, as I said right at the start, we first began to notice this post-Hummingbird, and it's about Google understanding relationships. And I think I remember once giving a talk where I said we need to be very clear about helping Google to understand the relationship between our assets, and the better we can make Google understand the relationship, the better understanding it will have. When we don't do that, or when we try to prevent Google understanding, then we can have these sorts of problems. Okay, and these ones are brilliant. These are some of my favorites, so I'm saving the best to last. Here's the first example. This comes from the travel sector. Now, this is first choice. This is all-inclusive holidays Aruba. Brilliant. Okay, they're position 1. Okay, it's not just this term. They're impacted by multiple terms. Okay, multiple terms. So just imagine you're the webmaster, and then your director comes downstairs and says, "Okay, how are we doing for Aruba? Brilliant. We're position 1. Okay, a week later, how are we doing July? Brilliant. Position 1. August. Brilliant. And then come 1st of September, how are we doing? Oh, we vanished. What have you done? Nothing. Okay, let's explore the SERPs. Let's see what's going on." And there is a spike there in November when he probably spat out his cornflakes and said, "Well, yeah, that's it. I've done it. I've fixed it. We're back on." But no such thing happened. Dropped out again. This is what happened. Okay. First choice is in pink. Thompson.co.uk is in yellow. These are entirely separate websites, completely separate. Separate teams, separate part of the country. What do they have in common? Well, they're all part of one big travel group that has failed to understand that if your content is reasonably similar, and should you be foolish enough in this case to use the same URL slugs, then you're just doomed for trouble. And here we can see no coexistence. One of these pages cannot coexist in the search with the other, but yet you've got two teams building two websites, two great websites with lots of content, albeit slightly over-optimized. This is the result of what happens when Google detects that relationship. Okay, so that's the first one. Second one. Okay, now this is my favorite. It's probably one of my favorite slides in the whole deck. And this time it's Currys. Okay, high street retailer. These guys are huge. This is October through to November. Now, where are we? We're position 2 for Apple iPad, and that's a big term. So as we come to the 1st of November, how are we doing? Don't worry, boss, we're position 2. Okay, maybe you could do so. Maybe you could push it up to position 1. Maybe you could improve the snippets so we can get a better click-through. Yeah, sure, I'll have a go. Okay, come back the next day, cornflakes will be all over the breakfast table, because on the 2nd of November, we've suddenly dropped to position 28. Geez, maybe we were trying to improve it, but anyway, this is not how we're doing. Okay, so Currys have dropped, then they come back up, then they drop, then they come back up. So what's causing this? And again, not just for one term, but for multiple terms, that's what's causing it. Okay, it's PC World in yellow. Okay, now let's go back to October. There was coexistence in the SERPs where we had Currys around position 2. We have PC World, and they're part of the same group. Dixon's, Currys, PC World, they're part of the same group. Dixon's, I'm not sure anymore. But anyway, that's an aside. So we can see clearly on the 2nd of November, Google decides to promote PC World, but not to replace Currys, okay, but to actually get a lower position and then take Currys down. This sort of cannibalization takes many different forms, but this pattern is very, very familiar. And then this goes on, and eventually, once Google gets fed up with this, it'll kill them both, and they'll both lose their visibility, no matter what they try and do. And you know what? These guys, they tried to be smart. Take a look at this. Okay, pretty much the final 2 slides, they tried to be smart. On the left, we've got, okay, Currys' website, and on the right, we've got PC World. Currys thought, you know what? Okay, let's call ours cheap Apple iPads, and let's offer deals. PC World, let's have the best Apple iPads, but let's call them offers, because we're a little bit more upmarket than Currys. But Google's not that dumb. Look at these products are exactly the same. The content's exactly the same. I don't care if you've got separate websites, okay, hosted on separate C blocks. I still see the relationship, and therefore I'm going to penalize you. So that is an example of semantic flux. There are many more out there, but I just wanted to show you some of my favorites. So just by way of summary here, it's absolutely essential that you monitor the visibility of your content and do it every day. You don't have to physically look, but at least have some mechanism to track and to monitor. Have alerts set up. So, if you suddenly drop from position 3 to position 7, to me that's highly suspicious. Any drop of more than 2 positions, I want to investigate, because that could be a precursor to some worse problem or some catastrophe that we've seen. Never be fooled by a straight line, no matter in which direction it's heading. What's going on behind that line? Is it made up of multiple URLs? Always investigate suspicious flux. Okay? If you think you're suffering from cannibalization, look for signs of internal cannibalization first, because that's the most likely. And if you are, be very clear to Google about pages you want to return. Use appropriate theming and intra-site linking. If you've got subdomain conflict, then you need to essentially re-architect, or at least agree ownership and doorways into your world, and then you can fix it. Semantic cannibalization, I see more of that every day across multiple sectors, so just be aware of that. And that, guys, is the end of my brief presentation, so I hope you enjoyed that. Any questions?
That was great. Thank you so much, Jon. I really especially enjoyed the Hilton Hotel example about how powerful SERPs are, and how even a domain, even a low-ranking one, can pull down the main site. That's something that I'd like to say, so that was really good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that is one of my examples, just because they then went away. So unless you've got historic data, you may never find out what caused that initial drop. So that's why historic data is vital.
Oh, that was really, really interesting. So to get the ball rolling, I thought I'd ask you a few questions first and get in there. Before I even, there's a few questions, I guess it's like a 3-parter, but how do I prevent this from happening even before I'm suffering from cannibalization?
Okay. I do a lot of training, a lot of editorial content training. One thing I'm consistently saying is that we're brilliant at creating content, and everybody knows that in the semantic age, content is once again king, and we've got to have lots of it. So we're good at it. A huge percentage of online marketing budgets are spent on content, and we're so often guilty of pushing content up there, whether it's product related, whether it's information, whatever it is, and we then walk away from it. We turn our backs. Sometimes we go and look, sometimes we check, but 3 weeks later, a month later, do we still care enough about that content? So I suggest we need to become better curators of our content. So for editors, I say, when you're going to put up some content onto your site, you need to take a look. You need to explore the SERPs. Okay, you can use site operators. You can use title operators. You need to understand, first of all, have I got any other pages that are either A, potentially conflicting, or B, potentially complementary? If it's A, and you've got content that's potentially conflicting, you've got to make a decision. Okay, which one is going to be the doorway into my world for this particular subject or term? You then have to theme that one appropriately, potentially downgrade the theming of the secondary one. Okay, and then if it's B, you've got a potentially complementary page, and that's fantastic. Why not utilize appropriate intra-site links? Again, using appropriate anchor text to leave Google in no doubt as to what this new page is. So it's all about that preparation up front. Okay, make sure what I'm putting up there is unique, is not going to conflict, and I'm utilizing complementary pages and content appropriately. So hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely. We've got a few questions from the audience now. So within your international conflict section, how does it work with different language content? Will the different language conflict it? Even further, that's from Roland.
Yeah, different language will absolutely conflict it. And I've seen a number of examples of that. So it's essential that you use hreflang appropriately, even with different language, even if the content is slightly different, you might localize it, you are still at risk of conflict if you don't make it explicitly clear to Google through appropriate coding which version or which page you want to return in which country. So yeah, hreflang will equals alternates.
Cool. Next question. What rank checking tools do you use?
Well, I mean, fortunately, we have an amazing product called PyDatametrics, which tracks 30 billion bits of data, and it's a global application that monitors. Well, it's got some really cool benefits. It monitors the top 100 URLs every single day, and it's critical that it's A, every single day, and B, the 100, because if you see any suspicious flux or drops, even if it happened last week, you can then go back in time, you can explore the SERPs, and you get every single URL, because PyDatametrics is URL agnostic. So that gives you also the benefit of not just identifying issues with your site, but B, seeing what your competitors are up to. So it's a really powerful tool.
Nice. So, and the next question. Google doesn't index all pages. Could it be because of duplicate content between the pages? Could that be a reason why it doesn't do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to be cognizant of Google's crawl space. We need to try and be as kind, as much as we love it or hate it, as kind as possible, and try and present a crawl space to Google that is unique, it is coherent, it is well structured, and as I said earlier, we've got to get better at making the right appropriate connections between our assets. So as soon as we stop doing that, as soon as we have content that's too similar, yes, that's going to cause us these problems.
Do you see any correlation between internal conflict punishment and other quality-based algorithms like Panda or Phantom?
That's an interesting question, and not one I've thought about, but to be honest, as far as I'm aware, this operates in isolation. It's not Panda-esque, and it's kind of a separate thing, and we've seen it build up. You have unnamed updates that come out, and some of these I associate with Google's increasing intolerance to pages that are too similarly themed. And it really is steadily building. So internal conflict or internal cannibalization is a thing all in itself, and it's something that we need to fix ourselves because it does appear to be getting worse.
Are canonical tags the best solution when you have two pages on a site that are very similar but you need both?
Yes, they can be very effective. They are an instruction for Google. So in the right circumstances, if you've got these two pages, and I'll give you an example, maybe you have a website that sells books. You'll get a hardback version, a softback version. You might have an ebook. You might have an audio book. Okay, the hardback and the softback, you might decide to canonical one to the other because they are virtually the same thing except for the cover. Then when it comes to the ebook, you might decide, you know what, I can theme that differently. Or sorry, with the audiobook, I can theme that differently because it's got a narrator, it's got different qualities. So if it is very similar, then yes, the canonical tag is extremely effective. And when it works, it can work rapidly.
And with the same theme with that then, so how do you create the right structure and the right theme right from the very beginning to control this from happening from you?
Gosh, another good question. We walk into so many examples where the sites are poorly structured from the start, and that's it's so often the case that people don't think about this sort of thing. And then the bigger an organization gets, and the more content they put up there, the more content editors they have, the more likely this is to happen. Because I'm content editor A, so I'm Jon Earnshaw, I'm sitting here, And I don't really know what Bill or Sarah or whoever over there, I don't really know what they did last week. And to be honest, I don't really care. I just think about myself. So we have to think holistically. We need to, if we think we're suffering from this, we need to do an audit. I would suggest we crawl the site, we identify those similarities, and we start to ask the questions. Questions like, do I need these 2 pages? Okay. Do they complement each other? In which case, they shouldn't conflict. Complement doesn't mean conflict. It means I need to downgrade the theming of the one that I don't want to be the doorway and strengthen the theming of the one I do. By that I mean strengthening the title tags and all of that on-page best practice. So it's difficult when you walk into this situation, but if you plan right from the start and you create a good architecture, always with the customer in mind, then you can be very successful. We come across a lot of sites that are going through a migration, and I always say to clients, this is a wonderful opportunity, not just to roll from one site to another, but to sort all of this out.
Absolutely.
And always put the customer first. Think about them, get inside their mind, ask what questions they might be asking, and then feed your pages some structure appropriately.
That was really interesting. Thank you so much, Jon.
Right.
Just a note for everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We have recorded this webinar, and hopefully, Jon, you can pass on that infographic, and we'll make sure to, or that flowchart that you mentioned, and we'll make sure to include that in our blog post of our show notes within the week.
Absolutely, I'll send that on straight after.
Great. Thank you so much, Jon, and we'll hope to see everybody soon at our next webinar.
Thanks, guys.